And welcome to another C++ video. In this video we will see all the steps involved from writing a C++ program to generating an executable file and then executing that generated executable file. Now before getting started, this video is for beginners and I have simplified a lot of things in this video. Let's get started. Now what is C++? C++ is a general purpose programming language that we can use and write the computer programs. Now, the code written in any programming language is called as the source code, and the code written using the C++ programming language is called as the C++ source code. You know that we use a text editor, we write the code, and then we save that in the computer memory as a computer file. Now, the file containing the source code written in any programming language is called as the source file, and the file containing the C++ source code is called as the C++ source file. Now how we can differentiate a file containing the C++ source code from any other file? For example, if we have a text file, then that text file will have the .txt extension. Similarly, an MP3 file will have .mp3 extension, and a PDF file will have .pdf extension. By looking at this file extension, we can say that that particular file is of which type. Now the source file containing the C++ code will be saved with the extension of .cpp. Now this is the most commonly used file extension for the C++ source file. Apart from this, you guys can also find .cc extension, .cxx extension, and then .cp extension, and .c, here capital C extension for the C++ source file. But the most oftenly used file extension is the .cpp. Now along with this file, there is another type of file which is used for writing the source code in the C++ programming language, and they are called as the header files, and these header files will have .h or .hpp extension. The files with the .h or .hpp extension will also contain the C++ source code, but there is a slight difference between the files with the .cpp extension and the files with .h or .hpp extension, and we will talk about that in a moment. But here .h is the extension for the header file in C programming language, and some people use that same extension for the C++ header files also. But if you really want to tell the difference between the header files from the C++ programming language and the header files from the C programming language, just by looking at the file extension, then you should use the .hpp extension, because it will differentiate it from the C header files. Now what is the difference between the files with .cpp extension and the .hpp extension? The files with the .hpp extension or the header files will contain the declaration of features, and the files with the .cpp will actually contain the implementation. For example, let's say we are writing a program and we have created a feature to add two numbers, and let's call it as add. Now the header file will contain what is the name of the feature, how many values we have to give to this feature so that it can run properly, and all these things. It will not contain the implementation. The implementation of this feature add will be written with the files with the .cpp extension. It has a lot of advantage, and you will learn about that later in this video series. But right now, just remember that the C++ source code is saved with .cpp extension and .hpp extension. Okay, now let's talk about the C++ code. Now here we are just talking about the things in a theoretical way. We are just drawing things. But when we start writing the code in this video series, I will show you all those things practically. Now when we write programs in any programming language, in programs we have to do the normal task again and again. For example, in most of the programs, you will be in a situation to convert the string value from lowercase to uppercase, or you want to print some text to the screen, or you want to read the input from the user. There are a lot of things that you do again and again while writing the programs. All the programming languages provide the built-in features to do the things which are frequently done in the programs. For example, as I said before, we print some text to the screen, we read the input from the user. These are the things which are done again and again, and all the programming languages provide the built-in features to do all these things. C++ also provides the built-in features to do all these things, and the C++ provides them in the form of C++ standard library. This library is provided by C++. It has all those built-in features. So let's say in your program you want to print some text to the screen. All you have to do is you have to use the built-in feature available in the standard library, use that in your program, and provide the text that you want to print to the screen to that particular feature, and it will do that job. In the C++ program, you can use the features provided by the standard library and you can write the code. Now this is about the features provided by the C++. In C++ programming language, what you can do is you can create a feature and you can share it with the other programmers. For example, let's say you are creating a feature to load an MP3 file from the disk and play the MP3 file. Now you can write the code for that and you can share that code with the other programmers. The other programmers who want to load an MP3 file from disk and play it, they can use your code instead of writing that. So in C++, you can create your own libraries and you can share that with other programmers. So if someone has already created a feature and if they are sharing that, then you can use it in your code also. So you can do that by including the external libraries. We will talk more about that in the upcoming videos, but just remember that we can use the features provided by other programmers. You can include the standard library features and also the features developed by other programmers if you want in your program. Normally we all the time use the features from the standard library, and the usage of the external library depends on the program that you are writing. Okay, now here, if you want to use the feature from the libraries, maybe standard or the external libraries, all you have to do is you have to include the header files which contain the declaration of features. Once you include those files, those features will be available in your program and you can write the code. Now the next thing is, in C++ programming, while writing the code, if you want, you can divide your program into multiple files. If your program is large, then you should do that. It has a lot of advantages. Now here, let's assume that I'm writing a C++ program and I have divided my program in two different files. One file name is 1 and the extension is cpp. So you guys can see here 1.cpp, and the other file is 2.cpp. Okay. Now the next thing is, we have written the program, but we want to execute our program. We directly can't execute the code that we have written in the C++ programming language, because as a programmer, we can look at the code and understand what exactly is going on, but the computers can only understand the code written in the machine language. So what we have to do is we have to translate this source code written in C++ programming language to machine code so that the computers can understand it and they can execute the program. So now we have to transform our source code from C++ to machine code. Now what we are going to do is we are going to create an executable file from this C++ source code, and then the executable file can be executed by the computer. Now the process of creating an executable file from the source code is called as the build process. And now let's take a look at the build process. So the first step in the build process in order to create an executable file is preprocessing. We use a program called as Preprocessor, and this preprocessor is a macro processing program. This preprocessor takes the C++ source code as the input and it does some processing and it generates an intermediate code. Now the preprocessor does a lot of work and it provides a lot of features. The preprocessor, it will clean up your code. For example, in your source code, if you have written a lot of new lines, spaces, then it will remove that. If you have used some comments, then it will remove that, which you will learn about that later in the video series. And also I said that we can include all these features to our program by including the header files. The preprocessor will actually include the content of those header files. In your source code, you provide the name of the header file that you want to include, and the preprocessor will actually include those contents of the header files to your program. It will do all those processing and it will generate an intermediate file. Now, the output of the preprocessor, if it is saved, then it will be saved with a file which will have the extension .ii. Now here we assume that we have divided our program in two files, 1.cpp and 2.cpp. The preprocessor's output will be 1.ii, which will contain the preprocessed code of the 1.cpp, and the 2.ii, which will contain the preprocessed code of the 2.cpp. Okay, now we have the intermediate code, but we can't really execute that. Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to translate this code to machine code, and for that purpose we use a program called as the compiler. Compiler is a computer program that transforms the code written in the higher level programming language to lower level programming language. And this process of using this compiler to transform the code from higher level programming language to lower level programming language is called as the compilation process. Now here, since we are working with the C++ program, we will be using the C++ compiler, and the C++ compiler will take the output of the preprocessor, which is the intermediate code, and it will translate that to lower level language. Now, a lot of compilers are available for C++. In this video series, we will be using the compiler provided by GCC. GCC stands for GNU Compiler Collection. They provide a lot of compilers for different programming languages like C, Ada, then Objective-C, Go language, etc. etc. They also provide a compiler for the C++ programming language. It is open source, freely available, and we will be using that in this video series. Now, some C++ compiler, they take the output of the preprocessor as the input and they directly produce the machine code. But the compiler that the GCC provides, it takes the intermediate code as the input and it generates the assembly code. Now the file containing the assembly code is called as the assembly file, and they will normally have the .s extension. Now during this compilation process, the C++ compiler will take the intermediate code produced by the preprocessor and it will generate the assembly code. And the compiler will also make sure that you have followed all the rules of the C++ programming language. All the programming languages have their own rules. For example, in C++ programming language, there is a rule that every valid statement should have a semicolon. Now, the compiler will check your program for all those rules. If you have not followed those rules, then the compiler will generate the error and you have to go back to your source code and you have to correct those errors, and then you have to do this process again. If you have followed all the rules of the C++ programming language, then you will get the assembly code or the file containing the assembly code. Now here, the 1.s is the assembly file containing the assembly code for the 1.cpp, and 2.s will contain the assembly code for this 2.cpp. Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to translate this assembly code to machine code, and for that purpose we use a program called as the assembler. The assembler will take the assembly code and it will generate the object code or the machine code. The file containing the object code is called as the object file, and this will contain the machine code representation of the source code. The object files generated by the assembler will have .obj extension in Windows and .o extension in Unix platform. Now here for the file 1.s, the object code will be in this 1.obj, and for this 2.s, the object code will be 2.obj. Now for every source file that you have in your program, there will be an object file for that. Okay. Now we have the machine code representation of our source code, but this is not an executable file. Now we know that we can only execute the executable files. Now the next thing that we have to do is we need to link all these object files together, and we have to create one executable file which we can execute. Now We can do that by using a program called as the linker. The linker will take the object files generated, it will link them together, and it will generate the executable file. Now here what happens is the linker will take the object files of this program, in this example 1.obj and 2.obj. Then what it does is, we said that we are going to use the features from the standard library and the external library. It links the features of all these libraries which we have used in our program. It links them all together and it will generate the executable file. Now when we talk about the external libraries, there are two types of external libraries, static libraries and dynamic libraries, and we will learn about them later. If it is a static library, then the executable file will contain that static library. If it is a dynamic library, then the executable file generated by this linker will actually contain the links to those dynamic libraries. Now here, while writing the program, I said that we will be including the header files to our program, and that's because the header files will contain only the declaration of features, and the implementation of those features will be provided in the form of object files. So the linker will link all those object files and it will generate the executable file. And this process of linking all these object files together and generating the executable file is called as the linking process. Now during this stage, if the linker can't find a library which you have used in this source code, then it will generate the error saying that it can't find that library. So in that case, if you're using the external library, then you need to provide that library to the linker so that it can link it properly. So the linker will generate the error if it can't find that library, and you need to go back to your source code and make sure that you have used the proper library, and then you have to correct that program, and you need to do all these steps again. And if the linker can find all those libraries required, then it will generate the executable file. Okay, now we have done the build process, we have an executable file. Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to execute this executable file, and for that purpose we use a program called as the loader. The loader will load the executable file into the main memory, which is the RAM, so that the CPU can execute that program. Now the loader, it will not only load the executable file, but also it will load the other libraries which are required for this executable file to run properly, and then the program will be executed by the CPU, and after the execution you will get the output. Now here the thing is, when we get the output, your output can be either correct output or it can be the wrong output. Now you guys may ask, like, how we can get the wrong output. Now just for the example, let's say we are writing a simple C++ program to calculate the area of a circle. Now the computer is just a machine and it doesn't know the formula to calculate the area of a circle. But as a programmer, it's your job to give the right formula to calculate the area of a circle. If we have given the wrong formula to calculate the area of a circle while writing the program, then the computer doesn't know that which is the right formula. It will just produce the output according to the instruction that you have given. And if something like that happens, then the output will not be the proper output. So if your program is not producing the proper output, then you have to go back to your source code. You have to make sure that you have done all those things properly, and you have to follow all this process again. Then you have to generate the executable file, and then you have to run that executable file to get the proper output. Now by looking at this thing, you may think like, okay, this is a tedious process, we have to do all these things again and again and again, but it is not that difficult. I said that we will be using the C++ compiler provided by GCC. Now all these programs which are required to create an executable file from the C++ source code, they come in a bundle and they are called as the toolset. All you have to do is you have to install that toolset, and by writing just one command you can perform all these steps. If you want, you can perform all these steps individually, or you can just type in one command and all the steps will be performed and you will get the executable file that you can run. Okay, Now you don't have to worry about the complexity of that. And also we will be using something called as IDEs, which will simplify the process furthermore. You don't have to write the commands, you just have to click on a button and everything will happen for you. This is about the steps involved from writing a C++ program to generating an executable and then executing that executable file. Now here I have simplified a lot of things, and my goal was to give you guys an overview about what exactly happens, so that when we start writing the programs, when we talk about the preprocessor or the compiler or the linker, you guys should know at what stage that program comes in and what is its job. So this is it guys for this video. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you don't like it, then hit the dislike button. If you want to say something, then write that in the comment box. If you want to watch more tutorials like this, then do subscribe to my channel, and if this video helps you, then write a comment. Your comment will inspire me to make more videos like this. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later in the next video.